All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for all of your time. Thank you for everyone attending on our first ever virtual forum. Very much appreciate all of your attention during this unprecedented time in our nation's and the world's history. Very much appreciate it. Before we get started, I just want to make sure that everyone can hear me. If anyone is having trouble hearing, please use the text chat and click on the text chat button on the bottom bar, or if you're on your mobile, you'll be able to find it as well. And a technical specialist will be able to respond to you to resolve any sound issues. Before we get started, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Dan Connell. I'm the Director of Business Development here at Verus. I've been in the legal space for over 15 years in various capacities, in litigation support to e-discovery to everything in between. And I just wanted to thank each and every one of you for your time and for your attention again as well. And just go around the room and just explain that.
Sure. So, hey everybody, it's Dan Meyer. How are you? I see a lot of familiar names out there that are participating in this webinar. It's nice to chat with all of you, whether it's formally or informally. I've been involved with Verus since its inception. I was one of its founding partners, along with my partner Mark Evelyn and Gordon Iverson. And as Dan said, we're here today to pretty much talk about the concerns that firms are having as far as working remotely. We have a number of panelists that we were hoping would help people as far as that particular issue is concerned, and look forward to engaging in the conversation about those issues. It's great to see you all.
And also in the room is our Chief Resource Officer, Lori Todaro, who's one of our panelists today. And we'll give a longer intro during the panel time. I just wanted to level set and go over what our goal today is. Our goal today is to discuss and share current concerns for firms having to work through the virus situation as it relates to remote work, HR situations, client communication issues, specific mass tort information, specific asbestos trust information, and anything in between that sort of comes up. We have a few presenters lined up that will give a brief introduction of their topics. We will have polls that come up, and then we'll move on to the Q&A at the very end of each of the panelists. After being affected by the Hurricane Sandy in 2002, Verus had a unique challenge at hand to go through and address sort of a concern that we're going through right now. Verus realized early on to be able to stay open and help clients in needs that they needed to get in place a remote workforce capability that really addressed not only the business needs, the human needs, and virtually everything in between. So we've been, at the forefront of this for quite some time. In the summer of 2016, Verus finalized the infrastructure to support a remote workforce. We had a trial period. We still have a physical structure, but we have a unique blend of a remote workforce to be able to handle not only the business needs, but the different legal needs and corresponding with the courts to manage all of that. So we are uniquely positioned to be, to offer guidance to all the firms and anyone out there that is going through this very unique time.
We've been working remotely now for over 3 years. As Danny pointed out, back when Hurricane Sandy hit back in 2012, we recognized that we needed to implement a process that allowed us to continue to stay live and stay online during turbulent times and troubled times, especially in a situation like this current pandemic. We have an awful lot of experience in terms of being able to provide for our employees and to allow them to work from home. Currently, every one of our employees is working in a safe environment, working from home. Our systems are safe. And we wanted to share some of that information with all of you in regards to your efforts to try to work remotely during this pandemic.
And another goal of ours, obviously all of these times are extremely stressful, lots going on. To make this fun, informative, get information into your hands so you can, update your policies and procedures. and working remote is a lot more than just giving someone a VPN access and the ability to log on. It's taking ownership of each of the pieces. All of our panelists will address all of that individually, the different components. And speaking of which, our panelists, Mark Eveland, our CEO of Verus, is going to be our first panelist, followed by our Chief Resource Officer, Lori Tadaro, Sean Furman, who is an IT specialist and founder of SDF Consulting, and they provide managed IT solutions, and they'll address security risks, everything about working from home, all of the traps that potential employees and staff can fall into. And Nina Dietrich will be she's a public relations and marketing communications specialist. She's a principal of Nina Dietrich LLC, so she'll talk about the media relations, the PR, everything, while people are at home addressing all of that. And then finally, Dan and I will touch upon sort of what's going on from a mass tort perspective, and obviously in the asbestos bankruptcy world as well.
Quick polls.
Yeah, so before we jump to the panelists, we're gonna throw out a couple quick polls to make this a lot more lively, interactive. Please, all of the attendees, please, fill out all of the polls. They'll really make this a lot more interactive and make this so we can tailor the content of what each of the panelists are discussing relative to what you're looking to get out of this as well. So please fill out both of those polls. And then before we start, let me just explain. If you have any questions during the presentation, please submit them through the Q&A tool on the bottom panel. Bottom of your screen. We will go through the Q&A section after, but anytime we're discussing, anytime the panelists are discussing anything, please feel free to submit any of your questions through the Q&A, and then we'll be able to address those.
Great. So with that, we can start with our panelists. Our first panelist is Mark Eveland. I think a lot of you know who Mark is. Mark is the CEO and one of the founding partners of Verus. He's also my good friend. Mark and I started working together back in 1993 at the CCR, the Center for Claims Resolution. Mark has a wealth of experience in the area of administration and assisting in the design of litigation strategies, as well as settlement plans aimed at resolving issues with a wide-ranging social effects. So with that, I will turn it over to Mark, and Mark, take it away. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dan. Before I dive into any real meat here, I wanted to take the opportunity to welcome you all and to thank you for taking part in this forum today. I know we're going through a period of uncertainty nationwide, and we've all got a great many things on our minds. You're all probably taking all the necessary steps to make sure your friends and your family and your community are safe and secure first and foremost, while we're struggling through this together, this constantly changing and chaotic national healthcare crisis. At the same time, I think you're here today because you're all also focused on continuing to serve the best interests of your employees and your clients and your coworkers in what is perhaps uncharted territory in this sudden, forced, fully remote work environment. We put this forum together so that we could share some stories of what we've learned over the years in our journey to become a remote workplace, and to also hear your stories of current challenges and successes, should you be willing to share them through the Q&A and the chat features, which Dan Caminel explained. Our hope is that we'll all learn through this process better ways of working remotely together, and it was a result of coming together today to share that these conversations will continue well into the future. Change is difficult in the best of circumstances, and given the current situation where we're dealing with sudden change that has been forced upon us by events that are outside of anyone's control, I think the role of leadership in managing that change can't be overemphasized. people get very anxious, fearful even in the face of change. And that is just greatly amplified with the current situation because this is being forced on us and not a choice to make a change. So the first job of a leader in a situation like this, I think, is to ease the anxieties of those around us. And I think you're all here because whether you're the managing partner in your firm or a paralegal or whatever your role is, you are probably in some way, shape, or form a leader within your organization. And I think it remains the job of all of us to keep our teams calm and centered through this. That, when we're all working remotely, means just making the extra effort to reach out to people and stay connected with every member of the team. I found that when you're going through periods of intense change or crises, just a friendly voice and the reassuring message that we'll all get through this together goes an awful long way to help make things work better. Most importantly, I think, is just listening to your team members and hearing their concerns, acknowledging them, and showing that you're working with them to address them. I know none of us can make the coronavirus go away, but there are small things that we can do to help alleviate anxieties and show that we are working through this together. Simple things like helping troubleshoot a computer issue when somebody is unable to access files on a remote server, or helping with a telephone problem because you're all working from remote locations and perhaps have issues with messages rolling over. Things of that nature help alleviate concerns. I'm not saying this just because I read a few books on this. It's because we've learned through our own hard experience. Dan Meyer mentioned that he and Morton Iverson and I have all worked together for quite some time. We've seen periods of intense crisis before, and that's what's driven us to take Verus down the road of becoming a fully remote workforce, or at least ensuring that 100% of our employees can work remotely. I'm thinking back and I compare the current situation to the days after 9/11. Dan Morton and I led a organization through that aftermath of 9/11. A company that was entirely 100% of the employees were in the New York metropolitan area, intensely affected by it. It was a difficult time, and we learned a lot of lessons then, many of which I've already touched on. You know, that the nature of leadership and the burden is to help the team pull together and work through uncertainties and changes that no one really chose to deal with. Dan also mentioned Hurricane Sandy. That's what really got us thinking that we had to move quickly to go to a fully remote workforce. That knocked our office out for about 2 weeks when we were unable to access the office. Luckily, we had a disaster recovery plan in place. We were at 25% capacity within a day after that event. And by the end of the first week, we were running at about 75% capacity, but we thought that wasn't good enough. In order to ensure that our employees continued to earn paychecks and our clients' needs were served, we had to sharpen our pencils and come up with a better plan. In the fall of 2015, we were hit with a freak snowstorm in central New Jersey in October that knocked out the power in our office for another 2-week period. We did better that time, but still not good enough. We were at 50% capacity within 24 hours and at 80% capacity a few days after that, but that still wasn't good enough. So we took the time then to say, all right, we're going to go to a fully remote workforce. We're going to ensure that 100% of our employees, at the drop of a hat, could work from their homes in a safe, secure environment and be able to do everything they need to do to continue serving our clients. That required kind of taking a totally different tack on solving the problem. Previously, we thought it was mostly a technology issue. We had to have computer equipment ready to deploy. We had to have systems that were ready to log into from remote locations, and that all worked well enough. But really the challenge was dealing with the people issues, the communication issues, keeping everybody on the same page and aligned. So we put together a cross-disciplinary team that worked together and established what were the goals that we wanted to achieve through a remote workforce. How were we going to communicate together as a team when we went to a fully remote workforce? And how would we keep everyone aligned and continue to serve our clients' needs? There were other fundamental underlying principles that group all agreed on were necessary and had to be met. And that was ensuring that when we're all working from different locations, we maintained the integrity of our work files and rock solid security around data that was being exchanged across multiple different work locations. So I say all that to say that technology is important in developing a remote work plan, but the real root of it all comes down to the people. You have to put the people first and then work out the work processes and the platforms that you're going to use to support the people in the processes. There are a lot of different technology solutions out there, any one of which could work for you, but every team and every individual works slightly differently. So it's really having those conscious conversations with your team about how does everybody prefer to communicate, what needs to get done, and then picking the right tool to make sure that it supports the team's needs in keeping together, keeping connected, and keeping the work moving. And that really comes down to what I refer to as the seat at the table. It's getting everybody around the table and listening to those various voices. So before you make a decision about a technology solution or a particular modification to a particular workflow in your office that needs to be adapted to support remote work, that you hear what everybody's perspectives are and you make your decisions fully informed by those different perspectives. In our experience, the top-down approach, we could have easily said, oh, I'm in charge here. I say Zoom is the tool to use and force that on others. That may work, but the possibility of that's remote. Tools that are forced on people without their input, without their voice in the process, generally aren't used, and things typically go sideways and fall apart when that approach is taken. So I would strongly recommend that while you may have been somewhat prepared for this situation, you gather the troops early and often, listen to their input, and make modifications to your work practices with everybody around the table talking through what their needs and what their shared objectives are. And with that, I would hand it back to our moderators to take any questions or comments from the program.
All right, thank you so much, Mark. I do appreciate that very much. I just wanted to remind everyone, after each presentation, you were able to submit questions. So if you have any questions relative to a panelist or generally about any of the topics they discussed, please submit them. There's a poll being launched up shortly that's going to address our next presenter. So please fill that out as well. And without further ado, I'd like to pass it to Lori Tadaro, who's our Chief Resource Officer. She oversees the key sectors, including human resources, finance, quality, training, and administration. She collaborates with our executive team. Quite frankly, she is the glue to our workforce. The remote workforce would not be possible without her. She's a pillar in our industry, and she brings tremendous amounts of experience to all of the aforementioned items that I mentioned. So without further ado.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for the introduction. Hello to everyone, and thank you for joining our first information session. It's a pleasure to be able to collaborate and brainstorm with all the law firms and all the experts that we have here on the phone today. As you've heard from Dan, we have been very accustomed to the remote workforce. However, we're aware that the current climate and health issues create new challenges for all of us. So we need to identify potential challenges as well as the solutions as to how we can manage our client needs and we can all work together. for two purposes. One, to be able to maintain our business, and two, to be able to maintain our company culture as we go through these trying times. So as we were going through this, our team was brainstorming to determine what are some of the questions that would be concerning to not only us, but all of you as well. How do we keep employees engaged in the remote workforce? How do we maintain a positive culture under the climate? We've worked very hard here at Verus to have a positive culture, and we want to be able to continue that. What can we do to let employees know that we're here for them? When and how often should we communicate? We've been trying to communicate very regularly to our employees to keep all of those lines of communication open. And how can we maintain productivity standards in a remote work environment where people are not seeing each other face to face every day? That creates its own challenges. So in response to these questions, we've bucketed our solutions into three primary buckets. One, effective communication. So we'll start there. How do we do this? How do we keep the effective communication going? While sending daily updates is something that we've been trying to do, and we have been reaching out to all of our leaders to be able to do that. Make sure that you're keeping the communication going, making sure that you're reaching out to teammates, making sure that you're reaching out to teammates that maybe aren't even on your team, that you feel that you're just thinking of for the day. It creates a great environment for everyone. Maybe health and fitness tips. We've been sharing those as well. Making sure that we're eating properly, making sure that you take a little bit of time to exercise to keep yourself feeling good about what's going on. We've also had employees take the initiative to just share recipes, share thoughts, share ideas. So we're trying to keep all of that going. Hints on successfully working from home. Well, that's interesting. Trying to keep a routine. Check in on your team first thing, get started for your day. Try to keep some type of level of order or structure in your day. And we all know that we're dealing with additional challenges where we're teaching our children, and so we're trying to keep a structure with that as well. Regular contact via a visual tool, face-to-face time screen using Skype or Zoom. Zoom has been very effective for us. We have an opportunity to be able to communicate to one another via Zoom, see each other. That's all great stuff. Whatever means your organization is using, I would continue to recommend that you do that. So briefly, just to give you an idea, on Monday, Mark, our CEO, reached out to folks via Zoom, and there was a flurry of activity. So everyone had a chance to see that. Everyone had a chance to jump on Zoom. It was a positive interaction for all of us. Arranging group chats. We think that's very important. Keep your team connected. This can be related to our social employees being very connected and feeling good about what they're doing. And also making an effort to reach out to employees who may not be in your teams, like I mentioned earlier. The second piece is productivity. How do we maintain productivity? How do we make sure that the work is still getting done? How do we make sure that employees feel engaged to make sure that they're working on those projects and we're meeting those deadlines? So as leaders, managers, supervisors, we want to make sure that those communications are happening all the time. You share those deadlines just like you're in the office. Make sure that you're following up with the employees, and again, staying connected. That's what's most important. We continue with our online Zoom as far as training options. Training is very critical to our organization here at Verus. We try and make sure that we are keeping professional development going. We try to make sure that we have an opportunity for folks to be able to build their career opportunities. So we most recently found out from the local community college that we can continue with our online training, and that will be shared with all of our employees later in the week, and we'll be able to start that next week. So that's just another piece of normalcy that we're trying to maintain for all of the employees. Be sure that we're providing regular feedback to all of your teammates based on what we're doing, the work that needs to get done, what our requirements are, and what our standards are. And ensuring that all of our employees have all of our software, all of the information, all of the technology that they need to be able to do a job well done. And then the final piece is company culture. And I mentioned this to you earlier. It's very important to us. So we really do want to try and maintain it. We work hard at keeping it going. We're organizing online contests to try and keep people engaged. Virtual coffee meetings, we've been trying to do that with all the teams and encouraging folks to be able to do that, even if it's for 10 or 15 minutes. We have employees who have taken the initiative to organize breaks where we're exercising, 2 o'clock every day. You could join Zoom and jump on a quick 10 or 15-minute exercise. Communication is key, so I stress that to all of you. Make sure that you're staying connected with your teammates, make sure you're staying connected with your groups, and all of us have a responsibility to make sure that we can do this better. There are challenging times, but we look forward to any suggestions that you may have as you go through this process, and we're more than happy to share everything with you that we know. Thanks very much.
One of the things I was just going to add to the excellent presentation that Lori just gave was, as an owner of the company, what I've done is I've taken it upon myself to try to reach out to 3 or 4 individuals within the organization every day. Just an email, hey, how's it going? Hope everything is good. Is there anything I can do? Things of that nature. I think people like to hear from people that are at the top of the management team. And I think that it's important for you to make the effort as a manager to ensure that people are that their wellness is taken care of. Working from home sometimes can be very isolating, and for a lot of individuals, you don't realize it, but going to work is not only has the work component to it, but also there's a social aspect to it as well. We all understand that, and with that missing for an extended period of time, it certainly helps for people to understand or recognize that that people that they work with or work with on projects actually care about them. So that's an important aspect that sometimes is lost insofar as remote working is concerned.
And I think one key takeaway here is that the remote staff that's not used to being remote, that's now pushed into this highlight, to highlight Lori's point, communication is key and consistency is key, right? When you're dealing with unique workforce that is not used to working in this remote capacity, and checking in early and often is a practice that I think everyone should employ, especially for your legal assistants, paralegals, and any lifeblood to your clients is very important.
I would chime in here because I did see the poll results, and it looks like just about everyone on this forum sees daily communications as the main challenge. And I would emphasize that, look, we all need to keep the work flowing, and daily communications is a huge part of that. Make sure that you understand the communication preferences of each member of your team, and those daily communications will go much smoother. I know there are people from different generations, different communication styles on our team, and they all, knowing how they prefer to receive information and to pass information along is critically important. Some members of the team may respond much more promptly to text messages. Others may respond more quickly to a ping on Zoom or Skype or one of those communication platforms. Yet others may not answer those things quickly, but if you call them, they'll pick up the phone every time. So understanding those communication preferences and keeping a list so that you know who prefers which channel goes a long way to help those communications flow.
Great. So what I'd like to do is introduce the next panelist. That would be a gentleman by the name of Sean Furman. Sean is the president of STF Consulting, which is an IT managed service provider. They're located in central New Jersey. Sean founded STF Consulting back in 2000, and he's spent the last 20 years consistently refining STF's offerings. We have worked with STF since 2006. I can't speak highly enough about Sean and his organization. They specialize in a all-inclusive IT services delivery that goes well beyond anything I've ever experienced insofar as managed IT services. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Sean and take it from there.
Thanks a lot, Dan. Can everyone hear me okay? Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I appreciate having me here. The last 2 weeks have definitely been some of the most challenging times that we've seen in our organization. We probably saw 2 or 3 times the amount of work in a 2-week period that we would normally see. Part of being here today is just trying to share some of our experiences with our different clients in all different industries. Some of the things, the challenges that we faced in the last 2 weeks, and just some best practices moving forward to make sure that we stay safe while we're in a remote work model. First, going into what everyone else has said, staying in contact is probably one of the most important attributes. One of the biggest challenges IT providers faced in the beginning 2 weeks ago were clients wanting to take devices home with them, desktop computers that, were not configured to be in people's homes. And if you didn't have, if you didn't have a good open line of communication with your client before they made a decision like that, it could be catastrophic, for, that your relationship with IT and, with your IT provider or your corporate IT. So, that I think at this point, judging by the types of tickets that we have coming into us, and we're kind of done with the hand-to-hand combat of getting people to where they need to be. And the next wave of things that came through were, how do I print remotely? How do I scan remotely? And I think that people are learning to adapt. I mean, like, people that might have been really resistant to getting rid of paper, now they have no choice. They have to leverage technology like DocuSign and even just being able to write a check and mail it at this point is a challenge. So we're all forced to think about how can we operate when we don't have all of the things that we're used to having at our fingertips, or we can't go to our offices. One of the most important, if you remember anything that I talk about today, the most important thing that I want to stress is the phishing emails that are going around right now. We've had a couple examples in our client base where people have fallen for clickable emails where they've actually entered their username and passwords for the network into a malicious form, and then their email accounts end up becoming hacked. And these are really disruptive things that we don't want anyone to have to go through. It's really critical, to stress to your entire team and everyone that's around you that, if you're not expecting an email or it doesn't look, something just doesn't look right about it, just be vigilant. It's unfortunate that there's people in the world that will try to take advantage of this situation of like this to try to exploit people. But sadly, it's happening, and I see at least one or two examples every day. So, that is probably the most important thing to remember right now.
Hey, Sean, real quick, before you jump into something else, we're seeing from our poll here, a lot of our participants want to talk about access to firm databases and the systems. You could talk about your experience. Obviously a lot of people now push into remote are used to accessing a system that they can quickly do inside of their environment. If you can just talk to your experience and suggested tips on dealing with those challenges, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. I mean, if we're talking about like the legal, environments, like most of their tools are still relatively monolithic. So they live on the network and they're not really cloud-based tools just yet. So technologies like remote desktop and, secure remote access portals like what Verus have are going to be one of the best ways to get your remote workers into tools like this. So things like, remote desktop, Citrix, virtual desktop infrastructure. These are all technologies that, can definitely help. They're not things that are like quick and easy to just turn on the fly if you don't have them before an event like this. But, some of it you can definitely adapt to quickly and make accommodations so that people, can get to those platforms, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. And just to all the attendees, you see a lot of people wanting to email confidential private documents during this time, and just to kind of while working remotely can have challenges, to really stay off of emailing confidential private documents over your email, to your point on phishing emails, right, Sean?
Yes, I mean I just got one the other day from a vendor that we work with, and you could tell immediately that their account was infiltrated just because I wasn't expecting what they sent me. And most of them, what they do is they leverage like they'll hack someone's account and then they'll leverage that person's OneDrive, and they'll put a malicious Excel document inside, or some type of malicious document inside that person's OneDrive account. And because it's a legitimate email account, and because it's a legitimate OneDrive, it's very difficult to block something like that. And it really, is so critical to make sure you have the, human firewall in place, and that you train your people. One of the most common solutions that we would recommend for, training your people is something like KnowBe4, and that's what we use at Verus. And, before all of this happened, KnowBe4 was something that we were, pushing so hard in all of our initiatives with every client, because it's one of the least expensive things that you can do, from a corporate IT budget perspective, like, versus administrative effort versus how much it costs to put in place, and then your return on investment. It really is, it's something that needs to be looked into for everyone, because no matter how good the technology, we could have the best firewalls, the best security, the best everything. And what it comes down to, just like a Trojan horse, like they're going to go for your people every time. And, sadly, that is going to be the weakest link.
Right. Hey, Sean, real quick, for those attendees who might not know, could you explain what KnowBe4 is?
Absolutely. KnowBe4 is like it's a end user, phishing / training tool that can be used to proactively send phishing style emails of different complexity to your end users. And, you can take the results, like when we run, like just to give you like a basic statistic, when we have a client that has about 100 users and we run KnowBe4 for the first time, I'd say about 20% of them, 20-30% fail on the first pass, which is a startling number, to see, like in a company of that size. So what you do is you run those first tests, and you see the people that they call them the clickers, and you see who you have to invest the training in, who you have to focus on. And then you let them do training, and then the next few months goes by, you rerun the phishing testing, and then you see has there been a remediation, have people learned, and then if not, then you need to have more training and reinforcement. But sadly, some of these emails are so good that even the most savvy and skeptical users can be fooled sometimes. I've seen everything from UPS tracking to, fake invoices to, the IRS forms. I mean, it's just, unfortunately, when you think that bad things are happening and someone's looking for you, it's easy to fall prey, to those emails.
Great. Understood. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sean.
If there's any other Q&A questions specific to Sean's expertise, please submit them now, and we can address them as we go along. We're going to be rolling to the next poll. Thank you so much again, Sean, for your time.
My pleasure.
Our next panelist, Nina Dietrich, will be handling public relations and marketing communications. So please fill out this poll with respect to her topic. And Nina is a principal of Nina Dietrich LLC, Public Relations and Marketing Communications, with more than 30 years of public relations and strategic marketing and communication experience. She is a seasoned media strategist and has extensive experience in crisis management and communications, having represented professional firm services, multinational corporations, major consumer brands, healthcare providers, and foreign governments in this capacity. She is the go-to for crisis management. Thank you so much for your time, Nina, and without further ado, please.
Thank you for having me, Dan. I was very happy to see that people responded that employee communications was paramount. That's very much a part of what we're going to talk to today. I'm going to share some guidance with you about how to communicate through a crisis that includes employees, but other stakeholders as well. In the middle of a crisis, communications becomes a business imperative. because in the absence of information, people will make up information. So it's really important to communicate often. Your first response, your first communique isn't going to be your last in the middle of a crisis. In rapidly changing situations, it's really important to share information as it becomes available, and before it becomes dated or irrelevant. And even if you don't have all of the correct answers, or if you don't have all of the information right away, you know, communication is not an all or nothing thing. Start with what you know, and then you can build from there as more information becomes available. Just commit to staying on top of gathering the correct information and informing your constituencies, your stakeholders, and I want to talk a little bit about that. When you're communicating, think of all of the stakeholders that you have to communicate to. That's clients, your employees, referral sources, maybe the courts, but you have to prioritize your employees first, and I'll tell you about that why. When times are uncertain, you have to remember that employees are your messengers. They're sort of your ambassadors for your firm, for your business. And so you can't really over communicate to them. They're talking to your clients, they're talking to other people outside the firm. And so it's very important that you communicate to them first. The other thing is that you want to keep the message consistent. So what you share with your employees is what you should be sharing with your public, with your other constituencies. That way you ensure that the message is consistent. You don't need to manage multiple versions of your message. And most importantly, and I say this often, public is public. And I'm going to say that again, public is public. There's no shades of public. Once you share information with your employees, whether it's in writing or verbally, you have to consider that it can be shared publicly, even under the most benign of circumstances. Employees talk. Information sometimes gets sent to the wrong people or by accident, unintentionally. And so when you treat that information as if it can be shared publicly, that will help guide the information that you share. It's important to tell employees what they should know and what you want them to do, as well as what they shouldn't be doing. When face-to-face communications isn't possible, and somebody else talked about the importance of video, video really is the next best thing. You don't need to invest money in all sorts of technology right now, but it does put a human face to the news that you need to share. So whether it's using Zoom or Skype, even if you want to record a message, record a video on a cell phone and then share the video via email or text with your employees, that's acceptable too. Focus on positive news wherever possible. Discuss what you're doing as a company, as a firm, to help people or to accommodate your employees. Maybe you want to share an inspiring story of something that an employee has done in their community or where the company's donating. If you can talk about any positive developments in the matters that you're handling, that's possible too. Again, but that can be potentially shared publicly, so you need to use your discretion. This isn't the time for long form communications. Keep it brief and communicate more frequently. This helps to really build trust and reduce speculation if you communicate frequently. Again, if you leave a gap and there's no information flowing, people will jump to their own conclusions. And often during a crisis, it isn't a positive conclusion. And you also assure that your audiences are going to hear from you whenever it's important information that they need to know.
Sorry to interrupt. We have a specific question. With a lot of the firm's clients or potential claimants, obviously everyone's home during this time, right? If you could just speak to, with a lot of the claimants and clients being home, the need to proactively looking up certain Google reviews and different reviews on the social media, because, you know, if you could just, you know, talk about how to proactively get in front of that, because with everyone being home, they're going to be checking in. What's the status of my case? this case, what's the status of my asbestos claim, so on and so forth.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you raised that, and that also speaks to the poll. It is so important under any circumstance. It just should be part of your day-to-day course of business, but particularly during a crisis, to monitor your social media. Claimants are going to be antsy, perhaps, or nervous, and they may take to social media to get information. If information isn't forthcoming, they may be especially nervous right now because they may be particularly vulnerable to the virus, and so people are running at a higher pitch, and of course, they may be particularly eager to get information because income is now an issue for so many. And so you need to be monitoring social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, for routine mentions of the firm. Maybe people are going to ask questions, or they're going to vent that they're not getting information. And so you need to monitor for that. And I'll give you some guidance on how to respond. Looking at Google recommendations is also really important. And in some cases, even places like Yelp. There are some firms that are up on Yelp as well, depending on the nature of the firm. And so you should have a designated person within the firm. If you don't have a PR counsel, outside PR counsel or internal PR counsel, to monitor those every single day. If there is some disparaging remark on social media, it's really important to address it for a number of reasons. First and foremost, and I'll say this again later on, that if you don't correct misinformation, it will get perpetuated, particularly in the online world. It is incumbent on you as a firm to correct any misinformation that appears online. Number two, if there is a claimant or a client that is upset, they're not getting answers, things are stalling in the court system, you should address that. You should show concern. You should show that you understand that they're frustrated, that you share their frustration, and then commit to informing the claimant or that class of claimants as more information becomes available, and just reassure them that you're staying on top of it and that as soon as you have information, you will share it with them. In terms of dealing with negative reviews, that's really a longer conversation. But the short form here is, if somebody has something negative to say about the firm, address them publicly on Google reviews and say, we're listening to your concerns. We have taken steps to address them. If their complaint is wrong, say, I'm sorry, this is not correct. This is what the correct information is. Again, you should go on record to provide clear, current and correct information. So I hope that's helpful.
All right, thank you so much. Very much appreciate that.
Awesome.
Just to give a quick, in the essence of time, we're going to have one last panel and then a quick Q&A. So please keep submitting any questions that you have. I'll move through quickly to address. So obviously, with a lot of the MDLs, leadership, plaintiff steering committees in the various mass torts have suspended meetings, have suspended a lot of communication because there's not a lot of new information to share. Please feel free at any point to check our resources that we've been compiling on our website, which we've communicated before, on any court closures, status updates, any information that we get regarding any mass torts, we'll communicate that out through all of our channels. So please continuously checking our social, our email, all of these communications. And just know that, we're all in this together. Mass torts is a team sport, so we're all really going to work through this to get everyone information as they know it regarding court closures, status of different, cases as we go along. And I think so. I know Dan wanted to address certain questions that came through.
There's a lot of questions from people relative to whether the Verus Trust are going to be taking measures in regards to certain issues with respect to the pandemic. Let me just tell you that we've been in communication with all of the different trust council and trustees. The different concerns that have been addressed and will soon be put on our website focus on three primary areas, which is the waiving of witness and or notaries in regards to documents being submitted to trust, the use of electronic signatures with respects to people not being able to get out of their houses, with respects to the current shelter in places in process or in place in a number of states, and then also the waiving of requirements for certain by policy or by procedure, the waiving of certain deadlines. We're working with the trustees to try to get something out that's uniform. As you all know, we deal with a number of different trustees and a number of different trust councils. So we are right at the point now where we think we have finalized everything that's going to be out to the public, hopefully, if not today, certainly within the next couple of days, where that will be finalized. We're looking for uniformity as far as all of the different trusts are concerned. So that gives you at least a sense of the fact that we've been in communication over the last 2 or 3 days with the various trust council and the trustees, and we're working on trying to get something out to everybody as soon as possible. But look for the information on the Verus website on a daily basis.
And I would just add to that, again, that the trustees of the various asbestos, asbestos trusts and other settlement funds we manage have been very cognizant that the people who are beneficiaries of these funds are some of the most at-risk people in our society, and they're doing everything within their power to make sure that payments continue without disruption. So that is what is really underlying that focus on the beneficiaries is what's really underlying those policy changes.
So we just have one question in the Q&A, and I'll let Dan address this. Will there be any sort of delays from Verus with processing claims, or should we expect delays?
As far as we see, we expect no delays whatsoever. We are up and running. We're fully functional as far as working remotely. Like I said earlier, or one of us said earlier, we've been able to work remotely now for going on over 3 years. So we see no delay whatsoever in regards to the ongoing processing of cases.
All right, there's a new question that what is the new contact support or new tool, I'm assuming, with respect to support? It's just a normal, right?
Yeah, in other words, if anybody is having any issues with respects to cases, you would go through the normal Verus support group in regards to questions. All of that gets funneled into support, and then support then in turn fields that out to different individuals within the organization to respond to those questions. But it's business as usual as far as any issues or questions that come up from law firms, funnel those directly to Verus support.
I'm just waiting for some new questions to be coming through. New question, would you recommend using email rather than calling for questions regarding claims?
What we would recommend is that you would send those emails into Verus support. If you feel as if it's something that's relevant to any individual within the organization, you can send it directly to us as well. But again, everything gets funneled into Verus support for purposes of responding back to law firms on individual claim-related issues. So let's continue to do that so we have consistency as far as the process that's in place right now.
And the email will be.
I would just point out the email address support@verusllc.com. That automatically gets funneled into all of our support team. So that's still continues to be the best channel to get answers to questions.
Right.
Okay, so it's in, last question here, and then we're going to end it in the preserve time. Will there be any delay processing the initial setup of USM firm registration docs?
Not that we're aware of. We are shooting to be ready and up and going and live by April 1st. We are putting the final touches on documents, actually the law firm registration that we have just been in touch with the trustee and TAC counsel about as early as this morning. So we anticipate that we will be going live April 1st, 7 days from now. So that's a positive and that's a go as far as U.S. Minerals is concerned.
All right, before we wrap this up, I just wanted to say thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you very much to all of our attendees. And to the attendees, please check your emails and all of the social. We will have upcoming webinars digging in a lot deeper, addressing these specific issues, any concerns around our asbestos trust work, the mass tort cases that we're handling, how to deal with client communications during this troubling time. We're going to dig really deep into these in upcoming, so please check and sign up for all of these upcoming webinars and virtual forums. We thank you so much for your time. Appreciate obviously all the nurses, doctors, those of you who are parents and have to deal with distance learning. We know it's a hard time. Again, we are all in this together. We are a resource here. Anytime you need anything, please feel free to reach out to us in any and every capacity. Thank you so much.
Okay, take care, everybody. I just wanted to mention a shout out to my daughter, who is on the front lines working for a helicopter company transporting medical teams throughout New York City and Long Island. So shout out to her. Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone. Have a great day. Stay safe.